Welcome to Perspectives in Mobile, the news podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Join us discussing the world of telecommunications, technology, and mobile innovations. From London, Dario Betty, MEF CEO.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives in Mobile, the podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum that looks at how we're looking ourselves at some of the great topics in our industry and how the people that are defining, helping to create these solutions, these topics, came themselves to this market. Well, today I'm very happy to invite here Munz Bharde, which is the product management director of TransUnion. I need to be careful here because there is a change recent, almost recent, I should say, in terms of the name of the company. They used to be New Star, now merged with TransUnion. So, Moons, welcome to you and to the new TransUnion, or official name for the company as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Dario, for having me here. Happy to be here.
Well, we have a little game with the name of our podcast. We call it perspectives. So let me ask you straight away, what's your perspective? But I have to admit that it's a bit difficult to pin you down in one only part of this industry because your job and TransUnion now, is it communications you cover? Is it fraud you cover? Or is it much more? So tell me, what's your perspective?
A job, I mean, when we think about what we are doing over here, whether you're doing a job or whether you're doing something else with family, with life, the idea is to do something good, something positive every day, right? Um, so we can aggregate that across weeks and months. It's like, okay, this is what I did. And it need not be just financial good, right? It could be something else. So that's my perspective on life. Every day I wake up, or I set goals for myself, like, what am I going to do? New Year is coming up. So that would be another, goal setting times. Like, what am I going to do this year, right? As part of my job, or even outside of my job, that will help or benefit society, community, humanity, whatever it is. Sometimes people don't get an opportunity to have an impact at a higher level, but you can always have an impact at a lower level, whether it starts from home or in your own location, community. But uh, that's my perspective with this, day to day rigmarole that we are all going through.
Okay, so you bring to the job the fact that as human beings we need to start ourselves to make the small changes or the important changes in our life. It's all get it will get reflected in there.
Correct, correct. And we have to question ourselves, right? Like, what am I doing about that? It's called purpose driven life, right?
Oh wow, very
What's your
nice.
purpose in life, right? It's very rare that someone finds a purpose in life, and it's even rare that someone has the skill sets and has a purpose in life and they match, right? So
Okay.
I mean, that's a perspective, but we always strive to find these two things, right? Sometimes you don't match, but that should not stop you. And as the scale goes lower and lower, you should be able to find purpose, right? Whether it's at your home, community, and that's what I meant by my previous few statements.
Well, let's have a look at how you apply these in your day-to-day job then, because you are managing some of the very important pieces that effectively make sure that everything is fluid and it happens in the world of
Yeah.
telecommunication. So, how does let's take one of your the product that you have been managing. I don't know if you're still managing, but Pathfinder, for instance. Can you tell us a bit more how that helps? How does that fit into the overall telecommunication landscape?
Yeah, so that particular service is it helps on the messaging side, but and my other products, whether it's LNP service, it's on the voice side. Um, They're both
Uh,
helping
can can you can
communication.
you tell me what's the LNP service?
The
So
other one is
just to
the
educate me a
SIPI-X. We
bit.
call it, it's New Stars or TransUnion SIPI-X service. It's an LNP service for voice communications. Um, but both these services, if you notice, at the core of it is doing communications. I mean, telecommunications, but communications. It's helping two entities interact with each other in a safe and secure environment, right?
And how do you do that?
And what we do is we provide information on both, and we help other companies validate that information. The sender of that information or the initiator of that information is who it is that they are saying.
Mm,
The receiver of the information or the communication is who they say are there, who they say they are, right? We validate those things, right?
mm,
So we provide that particular kind of level of trust in it, right? Because what is communication at the end of the day? You have a sender, you have a receiver, you have the package in between in technical terms, but it's nothing but a message. The package is nothing but a message, right? Was the message in between? Is it going through a secure channel or not, right? Is
mhm.
it in the right environment, right? And this is where you will be interested. Have we created the right ecosystem around it to flourish,
Oh, I like the world.
right?
And tell me more. What is, in your view, the right ecosystem for communication to flourish?
Well, the right ecosystem evolves with time. So
Mm,
20 years back, I mean, we're talking about 20 years back, it was the voice was very dominant because people trusted that ecosystem was in play, right? Um, people had people had less over the top channels to communicate with each other, right? From voice, like probably 10 years back, we had a dominant messaging space that came up. uh, Now we're asking for RCS. We're asking for even a richer communication channel, whether it's RCS or branded communication, whatever you want to call it. But that is a new environment and a new ecosystem as compared to what it was before. So those evolved, and they don't just evolve. I mean, there are other things that are connected to it. Processing power, your power of your phone, right? The bandwidth needed, right? So all those things, they come into the whole, like, how do you promote an ecosystem, right? Those bandwidths were not available, I would say, 20 to 25 years back. We depended a lot on voice communication, but as those bandwidths increased, now we can do an RCS communication and can have a very rich interaction between the sender and the receiver, right? Two parties who are communicating with each other. um, but that's the effect of the ecosystem. So that's what I meant by that.
So you just described how the industry moved, if you want, from the voice industry itself to a voice plus messaging. But data, what about the data? Is that, we're talking about 5G, we're talking of lots of things that come to change the world we live in.
Yeah,
Um, are you looking at that? Is that changing
that,
again? Are we leaving another big step?
there could be. So data forms happens to be part of the environment, right? Having 5G in place, that was part of the environment, right? But also, let's not forget about that's where the fraud element comes in, interference. Like when you have a communication, whatever medium you're gonna use, right? There's also a chance of interference. It would be interference from other um, parties, willing or unwilling, right? Or fraudulent parties or non-fraudulent parties, right? That interference is also something we have to think about, and that's where some of my services are used, because we try to mitigate fraud and whatever the unwanted interference is in the communication. We try to lower the chance of it. We cannot completely eliminate it, but as long as we can reduce to a certain degree. And then uh, feedback. So feedback is another. extremely important aspect of communication. When we talk in front of each other, there's a normal feedback process. There's visual cues, there is non-verbal cues. We shake hands, smiles, eye contact, so many other things, right? And then the feedback, there's an opportunity to provide a valid and reasonable feedback, right? We need to have that same element of communication in these new channels. And I think you have a point. I mean, with the RCS, I mean, the feedback, we call it a lot of feedback loops and all, but feedback is gonna be more important and more valuable over there to jumpstart something. Because until we receive that feedback and we validate what we are saying has been not just appreciated but understood, right? And it has not been misunderstood. And until that point happens, that communication is not complete. So that's another aspect. So going back to your pivot of the question, do I see a new way or a new place? Um, right now, we are still thinking that RCS or any kind of branded communication would be the next near term evolution of messaging or communication in general, right? But at some point, it will probably evolve into a little bit more. We might have omni communication where we should be able to move from one device to another to in person in like synchronous manner. That could be a possibility very soon, but I think we are not there yet. I think it's going to need way more data, way more bandwidth, way more, like probably like 6G, 7G, as Dario you just mentioned. So the environment comes into play right there.
Well, we'll wait for the 6G and while we roll out 5G as well. But interesting conversation as always. But let me take one step
Yeah,
backwards, possibly to go back to the very first thing that I say today. So, New Star, where you coming from, when where learned that your product and so on,
yeah.
is now TransUnion.
Yeah.
How is that changing the things you're doing, the products you're doing? Is the portfolio changing in any way?
Yeah, so one of the aspects of TransUnion acquiring New Star and New Star being part of TransUnion is that um, the telecommunication aspect. So New Star always dealt with telecommunication and service providers, right? So it's all about networks and those kind of things. Um, but the networks and telecommunication has seeped through every part of our life. So if you notice, e-commerce, whether it's e-commerce, whether it is um, any other any other aspect, whether you're doing gaming, right? Whether you're doing just uh, checking your status of something, whether it's social media, um, telecommunications and network has has completely, like, seeped into every aspect of someone's life, right? Of human life, of a society, right? um, that being said, some of these other methodologies or ways to provide trust. So remember, TransUnion has always been into providing trust, right? So that trust aspect can use and look at this segment of someone's life and, like, okay, this validates, this provides me the right level of trust um, to sanctify something, right? Whether that's a um, score on a certain level, or e-commerce transaction on a certain level. um, but any of those parts of a human life can be impacted by that person's usage on the telecommunication side. So that's the big aspect. And then the other way around is that TransUnion provides a platform which is true global in nature for the services and in the products that we have, right? There is a structure in place. There's a method instead of the madness. There's a method in the place. So there's more availability of markets, of new use cases, of new possibilities, right? That we're going to be able to take some of our solutions and pivot into those markets. Uh, Remember the way TransUnion works is like, they look at each market as its own entity. So any stuff that we have on our side will be treated very uniquely in each and every market, whether it is, India or Brazil or any other place. So I think it helps both ways. It provides a nice synergy for us to operate, and we're already into thick of things on that side of business.
So you mentioned something there, the issue of trust. So let's go. Is there a concern? Is there a real risk for trust in telecommunications?
Actually, it's the other way around. Telecommunications provides an additional level of trust um, to segments outside the telecommunication um, way of life, whether it's e-commerce, banking, whatever it is, right? And they are looking at telecommunications to add to their value of trust, right? They already have a certain ways of handling trust, and what we are doing is we are providing that additional level of trust, and some of that is a very what you call heavy lifter, as we call it. It provides even more. If you notice, like there are services around SIM swap, services around port 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 back fraud, right? Uh, or even telco fraud, and anything on the telco fraud. These other services or these other industries can use things. But at the end of the day, these other industries that govern their own facets of societal life, they actually also have other sources. So it's not just like, telecommunication is the only source. They actually combine multiple things and see if um, a high value transaction happening in their system needs to go through, or it needs to have another check, or whether it needs to be put on hold for X number of days, based on all these signals and all this information that they receive. So telecommunication actually adds, or it accentuates that level of trust that they already have. So I would put it that
So
way.
let's take one step back.
Yeah,
Let's take you back to the original of your career. If I'm not mistaken, Ernst and Young, but immediately after as a programmer,
yeah,
as a software developer, if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken. But then it's a lot of e-commerce that goes from Walmart's, Secret City, and in between. You
Yeah.
can tell me much more. And is that something that has helped you in your job today? You are on the other side. You look at the end to end rather than just being a programmer of the apps themselves.
Correct. Where it helps me, um, two areas. Um, One area it helps me is to go through a structured level of assessing a problem and problem solving. So we used to have an approach over there. I mean, it used to be an algorithm that we used to follow, and that same structured approach you follow over here, right? What are the assumptions as part of that flow when you're coming up with solution, or when you're discussing a new solution for a customer? um, you have a proper structure of, like, this is how your solution will, and then these are the assumptions, and then you test those theories and assumptions both for the main flow and that. So it helps me create or architect a solution for internally or even for our customers, right? The other aspect it helped me tremendously is understanding the new changes in the technical space. So I sometimes I call myself a technical product manager because I can actually relate more closer um, to the things, the way we're gonna be building things. So I have a better understanding um, and I'm sure other people do as well, but I do have a better understanding of how a theory is going to evolve into a concept, and how concept is going to evolve into a service or a product, right? And I can bake that behind the scenes, and I do have to depend at the deeper level skills, but it does help me tremendously to understand and provide answers for my customers when there are fire drills, or to provide answers when I'm scaling something, or provide answers when I am architecting something for my customers, or internally.
Well, there's something else from your career that I wanted to touch on, touch base. You work for United for Change.
Yes.
What? And so that was a voluntary perspective. We take you out from outside of from your work life itself. Why would you spend 4 months? What's United for Change? Maybe you want to describe that.
Yeah, so the United for Change was it's an organization. It gets speakers from around the country, and they have certain topics. It all depends on what time it was. So the topics change from time to time, genre to genre, right? I mean, the genre changes. So back then there was a lot of xenophobia in 2011, 2010. It was actually at the tail end of some xenophobia. It's like the post 9/11 had a whole spike on xenophobia, and then it kind of like died down. So it was at the tail end of it, but it was still tremendous. So that was an event. Was in DC. Some folks asked me to volunteer my time um, to run the operations. This is in the Washington D.C. Convention Center, pretty big convention center. So um, putting everything in place, like from the couches to the voice system to, like, whatever you do for an event. Um,
No, I was going to say, would you like to help us out? You seem to have much
maybe
more
someday,
experience. But
yeah. But signing those contracts, negotiating those contracts with the place, every bitty detail, negotiating with the hotels for the speakers, and everything, right? Security. Again, that was like a 4 month project which I did, help them out, but it was for a cause, as I said, right? I mean, what are we doing in life? Every year you do something or the other, right? So that year I picked that up. I was like, okay, now I'm gonna donate some of my time over here, and I'm gonna see if how that helps society. I would say around 6 or 7 thousand people attended that show. Pretty successful. By the end of the day, I was dead, but I had a control over everything, which was more important. But more importantly, people went back spiritually nourished, right? People came hungry with questions. They had concepts. They wanted to ask questions and get some answers, right? And they listened to these great scholars and speakers, and they went back. They went back satisfied. That was very, very important for me. And you and I would request everybody to do something of this sort or the other, right? Spend some time on the volunteering side, um, and not just in this kind of event, but also, like, in other aspects of community. Sometimes spending time on volunteering on smaller things will start make you appreciate. Great for mental health, frankly speaking, right? It will supercharge you, like 2 days of volunteering will supercharge you for a long time, right? um, and more importantly, I mean, you have to contribute to society, right? You have to contribute in a meaningful way. You have to make positive impressions on on other kids, and, like, kids life, because they're looking at you as a model, right? So that's my perspective on life. You can't do big things. You're not going to get a Nobel Prize. Might as well start with the small things.
That's perfect. And I remind everybody that they can also volunteer for Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Will be much appreciated, but for sure. No, but on a serious note, that these drive that you have towards
Once again, Dario. So
improving.
on that front, I mean, I would like to uh, mobile ecosystem forum. I mean, we do a lot of things, and I've been engaged with MEF for quite some time, right? Um, what are we doing anything on the nonprofit? Maybe there is some way MEF can do and then get a lot of volunteers too, like on the nonprofit
Nope.
side, something which is a social project or a social enterprise. A small thing, maybe it is telco related. We don't have to start a soup kitchen, but something telco related, and then we can.
Cool.
And I'm very happy to, like, every MEF event. Extremely happy, and I want to thank you on the show over here about, a lot of speakers come, especially MEF Americas, MWC Americas, and like, other spots too, that a lot of speakers come about issues that they're using messaging in their space of life, whether it is audio challenged, or it is like political stuff. But you have brought some good speakers, and I highly appreciate, and I always look forward for them and how things impact them, right? That society. So maybe there's a little bit more to do that MEF can do, and maybe you can sign me up for that.
Absolutely. If you're all interested in listening out there, in the last year, we've relaunched our inclusion activities where we talk about different ways we had a, we're going to be again at MWC talking about how we include different people, diversity, which includes in itself our activity for women, but also our activity for different neuro perspectives
Yeah.
as well. And then finally, I should also say our ESG product. Before, I think we just before that, we did launch it. We're relaunching an activity for the world of the and people with cognitive problems, specifically Alzheimer and so on, and how their identity and their authentication can we take it in the digital world, where right now there are lots of problems. So we have some champions within that, but all of that came from our members and their interest of doing something. So if you are interested in doing something and changes, come along and change with us.
Absolutely.
But coming back, I wanted to ask you one more thing, one more
Yeah.
change, which is, well, what is your view that we need as a community to change in telecommunication? Is everything okay? I mean, you told me that trust is in telecom,
Correct.
but I can see lots of bad things happening in telecoms too.
Yeah, yeah. So I think most of the bad things that happen in our space in telecommunication is, uh, there are more than one or two things, but the number one thing I think is collaboration, lack of collaboration, as a matter of fact, right? Um, we try to secure our assets, and the assets could include data or something else, to such a high level of scrutiny that we tend not to share things with our peers, or our competitors, right, in the ecosystem, because sometimes that sharing and that collaboration uh, can actually um, go a long way to reduce a lot of fraud and like improve trust, right? And I completely understand why it's done, but there needs to be some sort of, losing or lowering the guard, so we share a little bit more. I think MEF does a great job bringing people together, does some collaboration. um, I still don't see the fruits of that in our day-to-day life, right? And it's not just telecommunication. I'm positive it also happens other spaces, right? But I can only see where I am right now, and it's on both the sides, whether it's on the digital fraud, account takeover, financial fraud, also in telco fraud. That the level of sharing is not to the level that it should be to improve trust. Um, I think that might create a problem for our industry, because today, remember that whole communication, the receiver, the sender, the message in between, the channel that is used for message. Uh, People right now are trusting that channel, right? We are the
Yeah,
we are the guardians of that channel, right? But the more fraud creeps in, the less that trust will be. These two guys are not going to be the receiver and the sender. They're not going to be able to talk with each other with the same level of trust. We are always already seen that, right? I mean, you get so many calls, robocalls, right? There are huge efforts about mitigation. That's fine, but um, I don't personally pick up my phone. If I don't see a
yeah,
number, I don't understand. I don't pick up my phone. I let it go on the voicemail, right? Same with SMS. I don't click on links, which I don't understand, right? So that trust is eroding slowly and slowly. So I think that collaboration will lead to trust, and I think the trust is extremely important for us in our industry, because at the end of the day, that channel needs to be as pristine as possible. We're never going to get 100%, but we need to keep that trust of the receiver and the sender intact, and we are the only ones, I mean, in different ways we are guarding that.
great. Well, Moons, our half an hour seems to have gone very fast, so I think we will have to come back to some of these points. Well, but I do like your call to action. We end in on that note that says, do share more.
To share more.
Collaborate, but really collaborate more and more actively. So we will have to come back to that one as well. For the time being, thanks for your perspective. Thanks for playing with us, and I'm sure we will see you next in some of our events.
Thank you.
Thank you, Moons.
Thank you, Dario, for having me.
Thanks for listening to Perspectives in Mobile. Join us next as we explore telecoms, technology, and mobile innovations. Stay tuned, stay connected, and let's unlock the mobile potential together.